We also did some research on the board's impact on financial stability, and this again is at 480 some organizations. We looked at the level of board attendance, the level to which the board is involved in fundraising. We have some tools that we're going to give you on that disc that analyze board performance. We have another one that looks at individual board performance, and then the percent of the board giving to the organization. And then on the financial performance side, we looked at fund balance, percentage of private sector funding coming from individual gifts, working capital, and current ratio, which is your assets against liabilities. And I'm going to flip to the next slide, which is the summary. And if you look at the organizations in green that had the highest board performance, it almost in every case correlates with high financial stability. And if you look at the organizations with low board performance, which are the yellow ones, in almost every case financial stability was low. So it's just another argument for building your board. Primary responsibilities of nonprofit boards. The government says your first responsibility is financial oversight and stewardship. The marketplace says your top responsibility is raising money. What I call strengthening the pulling power of the board. I look at the board as kind of being the horses that get hooked to the wagon, and the board are the people that ought to be pulling that wagon. And then identifying and recruiting board members that add value to the organization. Most
pulling the wagon, what are you talking about exactly?
Well, metaphorically speaking, if you look at your organization as a wagon, you look at your staff as the driver of the wagon, you look at the people you serve as the cargo on the back of the wagon, and you look at the horses as those that should be pulling the wagon. In other words, providing the horsepower to keep the organization going.
The funding? Or?
Funding, yes.
Okay.
Funding. You got it. I have a slide here in a minute. We'll talk about how the whole situation is changing. 7 deadly sins. Again, from our research. The most common thing that shows up when we do research among nonprofits is the founder won't let go. The organization is outgrowing the individual that founded the business, and I know from personal experience that that can happen very easily, because I started a business back in 1985, and by 1992 I realized that I was not capable of running that business. It had grown to a point where I wanted to be on the front lines. I didn't want to be sitting behind a desk managing a business, and so I ended up selling that business. I let go of it. Yes?
Can I take you back to the slide before? Because I'm just thinking about the organizations in this room. Is a primary responsibility of most of the organizations room, there's an executive director and they're the only direct report to the board.
Right.
And so it would seem like one of the primary responsibilities of the nonprofit board would be to oversee and evaluate the executive director.
We're going to come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that. Oop. There we go. Because you're absolutely right, incidentally. The board marinating in minutia, meaning that you go to a meeting and it's 3 hours and you get nothing accomplished. Very common occurrence among boards and these are in terms of their own words. Director is drowning in responsibility, the staff is burning out, unrealistic goals. Number 6 there, what we're talking about is, oh, we hear there's some money available over there for a daycare program, and you're an organization that's serving the elderly, let's say, or whatever. Let's go get that money, and you run over there and chase money where you don't have any expertise in the business. I think about it, my visual picture of that is that a farmer out and the farmer in this case being the federal government out throwing corn out on the ground, and the chickens run over here and peck at the corn, and then the farmer throws some corn over here, and all the chickens run over there and peck at the corn, and you get away from your core business, and so you want to watch that. Decision making is difficult, and then the chair and other board members are managing staff. Those are the common complaints that we find from people in the nonprofit community, and quite frankly, almost every one of those can be mitigated to some degree by having a strategic plan, because that strategic plan provides a context for dealing with those kind of things. How the board's role was changing in the past. When I went on my first board at age 25, I was asked to come on the board because I had communications and public relations background. Today, if I'm asked to come on a board, the primary reason that people are asking me is to help them get money. It used to be advising, making policy, and promoting the organization. Today, there's been a sea change in terms of boardsmanship, and everybody is expected in some way to help the organization grow its funding base in some way or another. That doesn't mean every board member has to be out asking for money. 17 years ago, I served on the board of an organization called Mercy Ships, which I'm sure some of you in this room have heard of. And I said at that time that I would never ever stand up in front of a group of any kind, religious, secular, or whatever, that I wouldn't find a way to talk about Mercy Ships. And over the years, and I haven't been on that board now in 15, 16 years at least, over the years, I have given them more names and leads for donors than everybody on their board combined, because I constantly I love that organization so much still today that it's in the front of my mind. And you will hear me talk about it again before I leave here. And people after these institutes have come up and handed me checks, and I've never asked for money. All I've done is talked about Mercy Ships. And so your board members, in talking about your organization, can generate interest and support. Cocktail party, you can talk about it. How many names, for those of you who are board members in this room, how many names have you given to the organization as donor prospects or people to be put on the mailing list? If the answer is none, shame on you. Weaknesses. We talked about balance of membership. Yes?
The previous screen, is it, right now it seems like our board is all fundraising and less advisory policy. Is it shifting more just fundraising totally, or?
Oh no. The common wisdom today says that the board ought to spend 50% of its time on fundraising, 50% of its time or 25% of its time managing the chief executive, and 25% of its time on other matters. And there are big nonprofit organizations like Big Brothers and Big Sisters that are mandating that now among their chapters, because there's so much competition out there for the money that and there's so many nonprofits. And I'll show you a slide in a later presentation that shows how nonprofit growth is outstripping funding. And so the only way you're going to beat that is to be the cream of the crop, or move to a stronger status. We talked about balance of membership. Boards should really, as you look at building your board, you should be thinking not about who can we get, but take a book or take a page from the playbook of professional sports organizations when they recruit. They don't say who can we get. They say what kind of talent do we need? Where are we weak? What kind of skills do we need? And then they go recruit to those skills. And what you'll find is that if you sit down with your board and say, okay, who can we think of to bring on the board? You're going to get 5 names or 6 names. If you sit down first and say, what kind of skills do we need? We need an accountant, we need a lawyer, we need a candlestick maker, whatever it is, and then you go back and say, okay, who do we know that's a lawyer? You'll end up with 5 names of lawyers. Jim and I just did this with the Franciscans, and what was it, an hour? And we ended up with 55 names of potential board members, because we were looking at different categories of people that they needed to recruit. And we only had 4 people from their board at the table. And I've done this many, many times, and there's a tool, incidentally, in this toolkit we're going to give you on board recruiting that has all those forms that you can just sit there and follow them. And if they confuse you, call me up.